And we're live. Hey everyone, I'm Father Roderick. I am a priest, as you can tell maybe by my outfit. And I'm an aspiring fantasy writer. And I say aspiring because my book has not been written yet, but I'm in the process of writing it. And in today's live stream, I want to share with you the process, how I actually came up with this idea. Why would a priest write a fantasy novel? Don't you have better things to do? I want to talk a little bit about Ireland, which is the place where my story takes place. And then I'm going to share with you the story so far. And then I'll end with describing a little bit the process of how I am writing this whole this big project. I've never done something as big as this, and how you can help me do that. So if you're watching this, I'm streaming this to both my book channel on YouTube and as well as to my main channel on YouTube. So welcome to all of you who didn't know that I was also into fantasy writing, because on my main channel I'm usually posting about Star Wars and movies and TV shows. But you know, I think there are lots of things that we have in common. But if you're watching this, please add a comment. Just let me know that you're here. And for those of you that are watching this after the stream, I hope you enjoy this. So it's going to be about 45 minutes. I might do a bit of Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the comments as well, and I will address them towards the end of the live stream. So we're just going to wait a few more minutes until people are chiming in. We see Carol greeting from the United States. I think I can even show the comments on the screen, but I don't exactly know. This is the first time in a long time that I've been doing this. I think if I do this, yeah, for some reason it does show me this very big like a white outline. It never used to do that. So anyway, I'll just get rid of that. I'm not sure if you guys see the white outline around the text, but I do, and it's ugly. Hey, we've got Wyatt also, Anthony also from Las Vegas. Welcome, Anthony. And Peter is also watching. Nice to see you all. I hope to do this in the future at least once a month, just to keep people informed about how I'm doing, at least when it comes to the novel, of course, if you want to know how I'm doing. Otherwise, I've got plenty of podcasts and social media content to follow me on almost on a daily basis. But it is very cool to finally be sharing this adventure with you, because I don't think how long have I been doing this online thing? I started with a Star Wars website when I had just been ordained. So that was in 1996. Wow, okay. So I've been doing online content creation for almost 30 years, but I've never ever in my life written a fantasy novel. Actually, I have written some books, but I've never written fiction. And this brings me to the first topic of today's stream, and that is, why am I even doing this? The other day, I got a very nasty comment on Facebook when I was posting an update, and it wasn't even about my novel. It was just a question. Since I know that for this novel, I don't have a built-in audience. A lot of people that follow me don't follow me because, I'm into fantasy. So one of the decisions I made at a very early moment was I need to build an entirely new community around this project. Otherwise, I will have no readers, which is fine. I mean, I'm writing this primarily because I love doing this, but obviously, because I think it's such a cool story, I hope that people will read it. But I first need to get the word out. So, for me, the world of fantasy is relatively new. I've been a reader myself ever since I was a kid. I loved science fiction stories. I love Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I discovered Tolkien when I was a teenager, and my life has never been the same. So I've always been into these fantastical stories. I read a ton of books every year. But for some reason, I always had this idea in my mind, like, well, writing, that's not for me. I am a priest. I should be doing other stuff, And what are people going to think? That was also, I think, part. It's like, will I be judged if I ever were to do something like that? However, at the same time, and you know this if you've been following me for a while, I've been creating so much content about Star Wars and science fiction and movies and fantasy and you name it. And a lot of that, of obviously, since I'm a priest, there is a relationship with my view and my faith and everything. But it's never, I don't want it to be on the nose. This is a conversation that I have with a very, very wide audience. And I love that. It has broadened my world tremendously. And so, why was I saying this? I kind of lost the train of thought. But anyway, I was always kind of worried that if I ever were to spend because I could always say, well, with Star Wars, that helps me to reach out. Shouldn't the church reach out to young people? Well, this is the way I do that. But so I could kind of sell it like that. But writing a fantasy novel seems like a complete waste of time to some people. And so yesterday I got a very nasty comment on Facebook. I was asking for some advice. There were 2 popular novels, and I was like, okay, I want to get an idea of what people like to read, and maybe I can learn from it. So, and then that person said, you should be praying, this is not fitting for a priest, and then followed up on all my Facebook posts with similar comments. And then I clicked, of course, on the profile, and it was like someone who is very kind of hardcore Catholic in a very traditionalist direction. And I was like, yeah, I don't think that person really understands my entire ministry, probably has a very fixed idea of what a priest should and shouldn't do. But I also, at the same time, reckon that, I have actually been impacted, I think, by that fear of being judged. And that has kept me from projects like this, because writing a fantasy novel doesn't have a very specific, even, how do you say that, evangelization goal, or it's not going to grow the parish, it's not going to contribute to the growth of the church. It's like painting, it's like making music. When I sit at the piano and I play for an hour, nobody's going to complain about that because it's art. But fantasy, isn't that for children? Isn't that for weird people? And I'm thinking, yes, but you know what? I'm a child at heart, and I'm kind of weird. I'm much weirder than people think that I am, because they think I'm a priest, so they project a lot on me. But they don't know that the place where I love to be the most is not at the church for Mass. I hope this doesn't shock anyone. But if you like, a place where I really love to be and where I feel totally at home is at these fantasy festivals, where I don't have to be someone I don't have to try to be someone that people expect me to be. I don't know if that makes sense. So I can just be myself. And I've been a geek, and I've been a fan of fantasy and science fiction long before I became a priest. It's not that I don't love my parish, by the way. Let there be no doubt about that. But it is like, I feel when I go to these fantasy festivals, and this has actually brought me to writing my novel. I feel like there is a whole world out there that I'm not reaching, but that enriches me so much. I've made incredible friendships with fantasy writers, with cosplayers, and they're just as much part of my parish, you could say, as my older parishioners who come to church on Sunday. Anyway, enough about that. How did I get the idea for this book? Well, in October, I went to Ireland, and this was part of a project. So a couple of times per year, I want to travel abroad. I've been doing that for my entire life, and I was always filming. I had a job for TV, and part of that job was that I had to make documentaries. So whenever I was on vacation somewhere, I would just film documentaries at the same time as I was vacationing. But that program is no longer on TV. But I do miss filming. I do miss telling stories and traveling. And so I decided last year, I was like, well, why don't I do this? I can still continue to make documentaries. I have actually more people that follow me on YouTube and on TikTok than I have people watching that TV show. And it's always this kind of like internal weird hierarchy where television is valid and is important, and social media, oh, it's a hobby, it doesn't count, and it's virtual. But I know that my followers on YouTube, you that are currently watching this, you're real people. And you actually like these stories, so why wouldn't I just create documentaries for YouTube and get it to you? What is the difference between you as an audience and the people that are watching my show on TV? Plus, the downside of TV is it's on TV once, one afternoon, and then to be never seen again. It just goes into nothing. It's not, nobody will find it. Plus, it was a Dutch audience only. And so it was also very limited, the kind of people that could watch this. Anyway, so last year I decided I'm going back to traveling. I'm going back to creating documentaries. What are interesting countries for me to go to? And on my, number one on my list was either Scotland or Ireland. I've been to Scotland once, and I filmed a documentary about Celtic saints, and I loved it. It was we did a whole tour. We started at Hadrian's Wall, and then we traveled through Scotland to Iona, like the island up there where St. Columba has founded his first monastery. And then we traveled back to the East Coast, and we went to Holy Island, which was another amazing place. And I felt as if, we were traveling by car. That was the only thing that reminded me that I was not in the Middle Ages, because the stories that we filmed and discovered, that was all medieval Celtic culture. And it was so fascinating. And so when I was making plans last year, I thought, I'm going to Ireland, because a lot of the monks that, like Columba, who founded the monastery on Iona, he was actually from Ireland. And a lot of the monks that have evangelized Europe were from Ireland. And so that's what I did. I traveled for 4 weeks through Ireland. I started in Dublin, and I was retracing the steps of St. Patrick, who actually baptized a lot of people there, and that alone was a fantastic story. And then I traveled to the south of, the southwest, where there's a nature reserve, and there is an ancient monastic site called Glendalough. It's just the ruins of what used to be one of the most important monastic places in Ireland in the Middle Ages. And so I stayed there for a week, and I walked there twice over an old pilgrim's road. And when I was standing in Glendalough, that's where the story started. That's where I got the idea. It's like, I should write a story about this, and I should take people back to the 6th century when this got started. How cool would it be to not just read about this time in history books or if you visit the museum here on site, but what if I could take people literally like in a time machine? And that's what you do as a writer. You take people from the world in which they live, in which you live right now, in Las Vegas or elsewhere in the US or in Europe, and I bring you along, and I bring you to Ireland, and you walk with me or with my proxies, which are my main characters, and you discover that world and that time period from within. The other cool thing that I discovered in Glendalough were the amazing miracle stories that were told about these early saints who founded that big monastic site. It all started with a guy who was born in a royal family, or was he? Yeah, I think he was actually from a noble family. And instead of following in his father's footsteps, he said, nope, I'm out of here. I feel that God is calling me, and see you later. And he just left. And his parents were, of course, disheartened and really shocked. And then he walked and walked and walked, and ended up in a valley between two mountain ranges. And and there were two lakes there. There was a lower lake, beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. When I was filming there, I was like, oh, geez, my battery on my phone, I was filming with my phone, and the battery was almost gone. And it was like, please, God, give me some extra juice, because this is so beautiful. And then there's an upper lake. And so he walked across the lake, and he felt the moment he saw that lake, and we're talking, what's this, 5th century, I think. Anyway, it's like, this is where God calls me to be. And then he walks up on the side, on the fringes of the lakes, and then he goes up to the higher lake, and then he sees a cave, and it's been there since the prehistoric times, and he immediately thinks, that's where I'm going to stay. And he climbs up to that cave. It's still here. And that's where he stays for a long, long time. And so he lives as a hermit. And miracles start to happen. So people start to come and see him. And so he prays, and then miracles happen. And I was reading these stories in the museum. And I know, obviously, I studied history and theology. So I know that this is part of what happens always with saints. You even see this in the Bible. These are stories that are kind of like almost legendary. It's people know that this has been. It's not that the person itself has not been important, but these stories serve to show us, to tell us how important and how blessed that person was. So I'm used to be quite like. To switch on my historical criticism and say, well, okay, these are nice stories, but obviously it's like a fairy tale. It's a beautiful story, not necessarily happened like that. But while I was there and I was reading these stories, for instance, this saint, when he is in his cave, at one point it's super cold outside, so he stretches out his hand. To feel the temperature, or maybe to check if it was raining. And then a bird lands in his hand and lays an egg, literally starts nesting in his hand. And he is like, oh, shoot. I cannot chase the bird because the egg is there. And so basically the saint stays there for, what is it? How long does it take for an egg to hatch? As long as the egg to hatch. And he keeps praying and he's there. And then at one point the younglings are strong enough to fly away, and then he can finally reach it. A story like that is like, this is so cool. And is it a fairy tale? What if it really happened? And that's that what if question that triggered my imagination. And so after Glendalough, I traveled to Galway. And Galway, an amazing city. It's close to the sea. And I met with a Dominican father there who told me so many cool stories about saints. And not just monks, not just guys, also like Saint Bridget. I filmed a fantastic interview with him about Saint Bridget and her importance as one of the 3 patron saints of Ireland. And that too is like, oh yes, I'm not just going to tell a story about one monk, but there's also going to be a sister, and she too has gifts, and she too is going to change the world. And so all of a sudden I had two main characters in my story. And then from Galway I traveled to the west coast, and I stayed in a very small fisher's town, and I met through the recommendation of the local parish priest, I met with a field archaeologist, and he took me to a remote island, and you can only travel there. It's like Holy Island also in Scotland. You can only travel there if the tide is low. So we went there, and then you have to constantly check your watch, because otherwise you're never going to make it back. And he brought me to a place where there are the remains of a tiny little church, and he said, this is where the early monks would live, and people would come to see them at the church and celebrate Mass and then go back. And so he told me the story about that saint, and including again, mythological stories that were told, so that these saints were there as almost like a defense line Because I was like, is this just because they wanted to live like hermits, and that must have been terribly hard to live in, out in the open like this, unprotected. And he said, well, actually, the whole purpose of putting these monks, because they usually came from a bigger monastery on the mainland, but they sent out these monks to basically protect the land through their prayers. Because, and then he told me this story, there were all sorts of stories and beliefs that the sea was dangerous, right? And there were monsters and dragons and whatnot, and these mythological creatures could attack. They were the personification of evil. And you see this actually in a lot of cathedrals as well. I remember I was in Tuscany and in France, and in a lot of these cathedrals you will see ancient stories about saints, medieval saints, that are fighting with dragons. Like, you all know the story of St. Patrick, right? And how he chased the serpents away, the snakes, and there's still no snakes today in Ireland thanks to St. Patrick. What I didn't know is that there is actually a story where St. Patrick is not just confronting regular snakes. No, there is this huge sea monster, a sea snake, that is threatening to attack the people, and Patrick chases him away. And there's a similar story about Saint Columba, which is also utterly amazing. And that is actually the first written proof that we have that people believed that there was a monster living under the waters of Loch Ness. Because in that tale of Columba, so again, we're talking Middle Ages, Saint Columba saves a poor man who fell off his boat from Nessie, from the Loch Ness monster. And he told the monster not to eat the man. And so I'm hearing these stories and I'm thinking, well, what if I create a world and it is medieval Ireland, but all the legends are true? And there were men and women that had miraculous powers and that could do stuff that we today would call magic. And maybe at the time they would call it magic, but they, of course, knew that it was a power, it was a talent that was God-given. But nevertheless, imagine a world in which there are sea monsters, there are dragons, there are these magical things that happen and no one knows why and how, but they know that these people are important. And so that brings me to the second part of this live stream, and that is, what's the actual story? So I'm going to give you let's say the very brief skeleton of the story. So I've been working on fleshing out the story and the characters for about 3 weeks now. So obviously it's still very early. But in case you've not seen any of my updates, let me tell you what happens. At the beginning of the story, there's a prologue, and that plunges you straight into the mystery of what's happening. And we follow a hooded figure. It's evening, even nightfall. It's raining. It's very cold outside, and he enters through the kind of the gate in the wall that surrounds a small village. There's a church in the middle, and there are a few houses, and there is an inn, and there's music coming from the inn. There's light. It feels warm, and the hooded person, cold as he is, walks towards the entrance of the inn. But there's something strange about the music. Like, the music is going in a loop. It's almost like a record player that is stuck. And it's this small loop. It's a fiddle. It's, some medieval instruments. But it's the same loop over and over again. And then we follow him inside, and we see that there is a circle of people around an imposing, kind of looks like a monk, and he's sitting in the center of that circle near the fireplace. And in his hands he has a parchment. And he is clearly reading from the parchment, but there's no sound to be heard. And all the people are in a trance. And everyone is still breathing. Everyone is alive, but no one is moving. The guy behind the counter, he is like wiping the countertop, but he's making the same circular movement time and again. There's some people at a table eating, but they have the spoon near their mouth, but they're not eating, and they're not blinking. Everybody is in this very strange stasis, you could say. Our visitor is not disturbed at all. In fact, he walks up to the fire, he puts out his coat and puts it near to the fire so it can dry. He walks up to the bar and he just grabs a pint from another guy who was sitting there in front of his pint, and he drinks it. He walks up to the people that are eating at a table, and he takes the plate, and there are some potatoes on it and some fish. Maybe this is fisherman's village, who knows. And then he takes a few bites himself, but then he takes a piece of the fish and he walks to the guy in the center of the circle, because at the feet of this monk is a cat. And the cat looks up and is like, meow. And the cat is clearly not in a trance. The cat is the only living creature in that room that is just normal and is not doing anything. And so this figure shows the piece of fish and he lures the cat outside. And the moment the cat is outside, he closes the door. And then he takes a knife. And then it gets really weird. And he walks with the knife to the man in the center of the circle, and he cuts the neck. And then he dips his finger in the blood. Yeah, it's kind of gruesome. And then he traces a circle with that blood around the figure in the center. And then he takes the knife again and he cuts his own hand. And he takes some of that blood and he traces a line from the circle, from the blood circle around the guy in the center, to himself. And then all of a sudden he is sucked in, he kind of followed his experience, and all of a sudden he is in a totally different place. He's at the coast, and all the people that he saw that were in the inn, in trance, are now standing on a beach. And the guy with the parchment is standing at the coastline, but now he is armed in a shining armor. And he's got a sword, and he is pointing at a huge monster that has risen from the sea and is about to attack the villagers. And the knight yells at the creature and tells it to stay away. And then he threatens, like, if you don't go back to where you came from, I will summon my lion who will devour you. And he turns around and there is no lion. There's no lion. And everybody is also like, what lion? And he's so distraught and like, what is happening? Where's my lion? And at that moment, the snake attacks. And that's the end of that prologue. What happened? Are you curious yet? So that's just the prologue, right? And then you're supposed to not understand what happened there, but it will become clear later on. But what it tells you, what I wanted to do with this prologue, is to tell you what kind of book you're reading. This is mysterious. This is magical. This is like, I don't know. I hope it works. Like, give me some feedback if that works for you. Anyway, so what happens next? In the next chapter, that's where the story really starts, right? And we are introduced to a young novice. He is right now, and this is probably not going to stay his name. I'm calling him Tim. I just recorded the other day a video where I explain why that is probably not a good name, because we're in medieval Gaelic Ireland. Nobody's called Tim. But anyway, let's call him Tim for now. Tim is a young man And he is a novice in a monastery, which means he's not yet a monk, but he wants to become one, and he's currently in formation. And Tim is a really nice guy, but also he's very creative, but also a bit shy, a bit clumsy, socially awkward. And because of that, they relegated him to like very simple tasks around the monastery. So he's got to clean the stable and just take care of the sheep. Maybe he's also a shepherd at times. But Tim is also a really creative guy. And so he's helping a couple of the kids from the village, and he teaches them about faith and teaches them to read and everything. And he's got something very cool when he interacts with the kids and he's trying to teach them lessons. He has created little figurines out of clay and moss and bits of wood that he found in the forest, and he has created these, you could say, action figures, medieval action figures, and he plays out the story. But we see him in this first scene where the moment Tim starts to tell a story with those figurines, they come to life. They start to move by themselves. And the kids, of course, are fascinated by that. It's like, oh my goodness, what is happening? How are they moving? And so we discover that Tim actually has certain gifts. He can bring these little figurines to life, or at least he can animate them. I don't think they're coming alive, but he is able to make them move. But of course, it's something that Tim has always used, that magic. He's always done that as a child. So for him, it's nothing special. And so we follow him, and he goes, to the services. And when he's sitting, like, there's always a morning prayer, and the monks are in the chapel. They're sitting in various sections, and because there's a hierarchy inside the monastery, you've got obviously the abbot, who is not a nice guy, and we will discover that later. Very strict, the boss. And then you have the regular monks, you've got the novices, which are the younger, aspiring monks, you could say. You also have female religious sisters, nuns, and they are always at the prayer as well. So this is something I researched, and I discovered this also on Iona. You had the main monastery, which is all male, but then very close by was another site, and that's where the sisters lived, and they would pray together, but they would also help the monks. So they would, do the laundry and make food and that sort of stuff. So that's also the case in my monastery. So that we see these younger sisters, and one of them is again temporary name Ilara. So Ilara is a young girl who entered the monastery with lots of ideals and lots of hopes and aspirations, but also because it was for her a way to escape home. She has had a pretty rough childhood, and she felt that, well, now I'm going to enter in a monastery and my parents will have no power over me anymore. And so that's her motivation. We learn this through dialogue or maybe further down the road. But anyway, that's a little bit of backstory for Ilara. And so Tim, when he's in the morning prayer, he always looks at these, like the most important monks are the scribes. And the scribes are, this again is a real function that existed in medieval monasteries. They work on these books. Like, have you ever heard of the Book of Kells? You can see that at the Trinity College in Dublin, and it's basically the gospel, but it is calligraphed by monks. These were usually pretty young monks because you need to have good eyesight and good handwriting and a lot of stamina because of the hard work. And they would copy the gospel, but they would also create all sorts of what they called illuminations, like little pictures. And what is so fascinating about those books, and the Book of Kells is the most famous one, but there's also, there are a couple of those books, also one that was actually made in the 6th century. These designs, these drawings, would also contain mythological creatures. And one of them, one of those creatures that we see in the Book of Kells, is actually a lion. Remember the lion? But the lion is vomiting rainbows. I'm not kidding you. There's actually a picture of a rainbow vomiting lion in the Book of Kells. Remember that because it's very important for what comes next. So, Tim dreams of becoming a scribe. He really, really would love to be part of that group because he's a creative guy, but he also at the same time thinks he's never going to be able to get admission to that group because, he's not the smartest kid on the block. That's what he tells himself. And so every year there is an admission test, you could say, where you have to present yourself to the abbot and you have to go through some tests, and on the basis of the results, the abbot will or will not grant you the privilege of becoming an apprentice scribe. And Tim knows that it's very soon there's going to be another yearly admission test, and he really wants to be part of that. I need to shorten this because it's getting a little bit too detailed, but anyway, he fails the test, and to make things worse, one of the other monks sees him performing magic, bringing these little figurines to life, which Tim didn't know that is an incredibly serious transgression of the rules, because how am I going to say this? The scribes are actually working in the tower of the monastery. I don't know if you've ever seen these early medieval towers. They're very slim. They're not very big. They're basically a bell tower. But every morning after prayer, these scribes climb up a small wooden staircase, and they enter the door, and they don't return for the rest of the day. They only come back for evening prayer. And Tim, for years, has been wondering, how is it possible all these monks fit in that small tower? But what are they doing there? And we're going to discover this later on. That tower is like the TARDIS. Once you enter that tower, it is huge on the inside. It's a massive, think of the Ministry of Magic in Harry Potter. It's an entire cathedral on the inside, circular. And what are the scribes doing there? They are writing stories on parchment, or it's actually parchment hadn't been invented yet. It was skin, like lamb skin and stuff. And at the end of the day, these pages are added to what is called the Codex Fabulae, which is a magical book that contains stories of hope. Let's put it that way. And the scribes are adding these. This is why it's such a high class kind of monk. They have received a training to be so open to whatever divine inspiration that they can actually write stories that will create hope and do much more. The book is going to be super important in the rest of the story. But anyway, suffice it to say that book contains not just regular stories, but stories with creative power. And to help the monks create these pages, there are angels in that tower. Angels that temporarily take hold of living beings, because obviously angels are pure spirits. They don't have a visual appearance. But St. Thomas Aquinas, a medieval theologian, he said, well, so how is it possible that the angel speaks to Mary in the gospel? And he says, well, maybe he just borrowed a body. So that gave me an idea. It's like, these angels are helping the monks by temporarily inhabiting them and steering their hand, right? So it's like a collaboration between heaven and earth. This is why those stories have such creative, magical powers. Anyway, why is this important? Once a year. So Tim, by the way, fails his test. He's not admitted to the scribes, which is so frustrating to him. He also knows that Elara is super envious of all these male monks that get to become scribes. She is probably relegated to the kitchen for the rest of her life. So the monastic life has been one big disillusion for her, and she's frustrated about that. So what happens next? Once a year, the monks will travel with this book that I talked about. It's called this Codex Fabulae. They travel to a central place in Ireland. I think it's going to be Clonmacnoise, which used to be another big monastic site in the center of Ireland. And you can easily get to there because there's a river that passes by. So anyway, but that book is then carried in procession by the monks for a yearly reading of the book. And that's where we will discover the true power of the Codex Fabulae. Because this book, if you read from it in a liturgy, what you read will become. It's literally the word will become a reality. And so if the tales are about the harvest, about life, about hope, it will actually manifest. But it's only if you read from the Codex. Tim and Elara are part of the procession, and they travel for a couple of days towards Clonmacnoise. They fall behind because of reasons, and they uncover a plot by some very strange, mysterious dark figures to actually steal the book, to attack the monks during the ceremony. And Tim and Elara are able to prevent this from happening. It's a big moment. This is the first big action scene in the book. Because of that, they're noticed by the abbot. And the abbot, I forgot to say, the abbot has confiscated the minifigures and has stored them in the tower. That will come back later. But anyway, so the abbot now says, okay, I'm going to give you admission to the scribes. I will assign a tutor to you. That's the Obi-Wan Kenobi in the story. This old scribe who has bad eyes, so he no longer can make do the calligraphy himself, but he's teaching the younger monks the secrets of this writing magic, right? Elara thinks that she too, because she was instrumental at preventing this attack, that she too will be granted this wish of becoming a scribe. And then the abbot actually tells her, no, I will just make you the leader of the novices. You can train the other girls to do the laundry. And she's like, what? But then Tim actually speaks to his mentor, and the mentor agrees that this is not fair, and why should women be excluded from this, from becoming a scribe? And so together they devise a way so that he can also train Elara. But it will involve Elara having to disguise herself as a male monk. So that's what she does. So she dresses up as one of the male monks and pretends to be a novice, and then the two of them sneak into the tower, and that's where they see what I just described. They discover this incredible magic place where angels and human monks work together on this codex, etc. But during the attack at Clonmacnoise, they encounter a young boy or a young man. And he is so impressed by everything that happened that he wants to become a novice as well. And he befriends Tim and Elara. And he speaks with them and is like, oh, wow, okay. Tim tells him about, the abbot having confiscated his minifigures. and the guy is called Furtivus, a beautiful Latin name, Furtivus. 40 for friends. So Furtivus tells Tim, well, you know what? I don't think that's fair. You should just, recover your minifigures. The abbot probably has forgotten about them. I had forgotten that when the attack happens on, at Clonmacnoise, in the aftermath, they find a key that has been dropped by the attackers. And so they bring that back to the monastery, and Furtivus, or maybe it's Furtivus who has found the key, but he still holds on to it, and he says, this key, this is not a normal key. This key will actually give access to places where the one who uses the key needs to be. I'm going to give it to you. You're just going to go up to the tower and get your minifigures back. That's what Tim does. Tim goes out with Alara and with Furtivus into the tower at night, trying to find his figures. And then he opens a door, one door too many. And on the other side of the door is this dark angel or this demon who attacks him and knocks him to the ground. No, this is not happening during the night. This is happening at the end of the day. The monks are still there. And Tim is temporarily knocked out. And when he awakens, all the monks are killed. And the codex is gone. The book has been stolen. And Furtivus is sitting in a corner, and he's crying because he was afraid and something happened there, and we don't know what. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, but that's kind of the rest of the story is Tim and Alara going on a quest to retrieve that book. And Furtivus is not who we think he is, because an angel has on purpose taken possession of him. And now the two of them work together to undermine these good monks. And what their ultimate goal is not only to steal the codex, because there is a reason that they do that, which will be explained later, but also to put an end to all these monks that are traveling the country to do what we saw in the opening scene, right? They go and they tell stories, and these stories give people hope. And these evil mages are actually want to destroy those stories. And Furtivus has a very specific reason why he works for the bad guys, and has all to do with his own personal traumas. Wow, okay, so I just realized, I thought I'm just going to tell the story in 10 minutes, but this is just the first 10 chapters, and there are 40 chapters in the book. So anyway, that is what I can share right now. I would like to wrap things up, this stream, by going through your comments. If you have any additional questions, let me know and I'll address them. And then after I'm done answering your questions and reacting to the comments, I will tell you how you can help me with this book, because I cannot do this by myself. So stay tuned. Let me see. So we've got some greetings there. Peter wonders, is this going to be a bit like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit? I'm not sure if this is... I mean, I'm definitely influenced by Tolkien, but mostly when it comes to kind of the scope of the story. I don't know, you be the judge. I don't know. This is not a completely separate world from ours. So the world building of Tolkien is literally Middle Earth is not our Earth. Well, it's our planet, but it's not the world that we know. Whereas my story is it's a different type of world building, where there's the real world, but then underneath is like you could say a magical layer. So it's similar to what the Harry Potter books do, where you have the regular London, but you also have Diagon Alley. In my story, there's even an element of what they call portal fantasy, because the books are portals. They literally can bring you into another world. And that is going to be, I think, an incredibly powerful idea for not just this book, but if I get this done, I think this gives me material for at least a trilogy. So, but anyway, so let's see. Plenty of priests and religious sisters and monks have written novels just saying. Yeah, it's true. It's just something I've been programming myself with, and it's unfortunate that I only discover this like at this time of my life. I was just telling someone else earlier today online, it's like I should have written this 20 years ago. But you know, the best time to write a fantasy novel is 20 years ago. The second best is today. So here we are. Carol says, I used to feel bad about writing fiction and fantasy for my own fun. I don't publish it until I realized that Jesus used stories to touch hearts and enlighten minds. You say it better than I can say it myself. The parish funds your fantasy. Not really, because the parish is not paying me. I have to raise my own funds, but that's not to worry. So I'm assisting here, of course, in the parish, but as a volunteer. Jan says, and G. William also, interesting prologue, works for me. SP says that would definitely pique my interest. Artindi is there as too. Is food brought to them, or do they have stockpiles inside? No, the monastery is actually self-sufficient, as were all the monasteries in the Middle Ages. They would have a farm, they would grow their own vegetables and wheat and whatnot. Razgriz says, are you going to have autographed copies? I plan on buying a few copies for me and gifts as well. So far, it sounds amazing. I'll let you know if there first needs to be a book. But I certainly would love to have printed copies and to have signed copies as well. But that is still that sounds like a fantasy story. I still cannot fully believe that this may one day be a real book. I don't know. It's just right now it's all in my mind and on a few, Google documents right now. But I personally cannot believe that this will once be a book that I can hold in my hand. But wait and see. Stay tuned. The Codex, the word will come reality. Jesus is the word. Well, you actually exactly understand where my inspiration came from. Like in Genesis, we see that the word of God is, the word is spoken and it creates. God says, let it be light, and there's light. So this is why it's a collaboration between God and man. And this is why the Codex is, because it's inspired by God himself, is able to create things. It's just never used like that, of course, in the Bible. But in my fantasy version of Ireland, why not? But you guessed it right. That's where the idea comes from. Jan says, nice to hear you enthuse about story and to sort of see this developing in your mind. It seems to me that you're still feeling your way around to make this a properly sensible story. It's true, and I realize that once I'm trying to convey it, and then I remember, oh no, that was an earlier version. I already came up with this and that. I think what my story needs most of all is a very solid structure, because it's super easy to get lost in just this avalanche of ideas. But it needs to have a good structure that will propel the story forward. And it needs to have extremely good characters. Because I feel that the characters of Tim and Elara, and also Furtivus later on, are the heart and soul of the story. If their story arc, if their character development does not work, falls flat, then the whole book is going to be rubbish. And that is obviously still something that I have never written a book. But I'm starting to realize, it's not just the idea, it's not just the plot. There are so many dimensions when it comes to story writing. This is why it's going to take a while. Because there will be a first draft and it's going to be terrible. And then there's going to be a revised version and it's going to be equally terrible. And then so this is going to be a very iterative process. But at the same time, you got to start somewhere, right? But thanks for the feedback. Steven asked, when can I pre-order? I'll get to that in a minute. G. Williams says, God bless your efforts in ministry. Thank you. Carol says, reading the book sets the parallel for tomorrow's reading from Nehemiah at Mass. I'm a priest, so yeah, these things tend to weave together. SP asks, how does magic work? What is the source of this magic? Well, the source of this magic is twofold. It's called story magic, in fact, and this mysterious figure that we encounter in the prologue is a story mage. That's how they're called. And the story mages are actually the scribes that, after they've completed their work as scribes, will then go on to travel the country and bring pieces of the codex to places where they need a little bit of inspiration. And so the magic works through the storytelling. And without the storytelling, there is no story, there is no alternate reality. But the more powerful the story mage, the more powerful the actual effect of the magic. There are lots and lots of nuances, because there's also obviously a dark variant of this. You can poison a story, and there's a whole backstory how that works and what feeds that. And then there is also the divine magic, you could say the divine power of the magic of the Codex Fabulae, which, I don't know if I want to spoil you, but that is one of the things. This is one of the reasons that the book gets stolen, because there's a whole plot behind that. There is a master of the evil mages, and he has a very particular reason for stealing the Codex. All will be revealed in time, my friends. And then, of course, there are also moments where the magic does not work. And so there, obviously, every magic needs to have a flaw. And that is certainly going to be the case. And then you've got, of course, Tim, who has this almost like natural magic. And he can animate these little figurines. And remember the cat and the lion? There is a story there too. That becomes very important for the final battle. So remember the cat, the lion, the rainbows, the minifigures, it all will come together at the end. Anthony says, do you have the ending planned out, or are you letting inspiration guide you as you write? That's a good question. Right now I'm a planner, but it is because I know that otherwise I risk coming up with way too many ideas and no structure. However, as you've been able to tell, while I'm narrating, there are always new nuances, new details that pop up. But I want the overall structure of the story to be more or less planned out. So I already know how this is going to end. I even know what the thing behind after the credits is going to be, because obviously there's going to be an opening for more stories if this story is going to be good enough. But yeah, so I do know what's going to happen. I also know what's going to happen to my main characters and how all that kind of ties in with the plot of the story. But all the details, the dialogue, all that, there's so much room for creativity while I'm writing. Anthony says, hearing the name Tim make me think of Tim the Enchanter from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Didn't even think of that. But most likely these names will change into Gaelic names over time. Carol says, outlines are good for the reasons you give, but in writing you may find that you don't have to write it chapter by chapter in linear fashion. You can write one chapter that comes later and backtrack. Sure. That's still for me to be discovered, what kind of writing works for me. And I also know that it's very well possible that towards the end, my characters will do something that I did not plan for, and I will have to adjust. But that's kind of that's the magic. That's literally the magic of storytelling. All right. Hey, Special Chronicles. Good to see you as well. Let me wrap this stream up, because I want to keep this under an hour, by telling you how you can help me. And that is by joining my street team. What is a street team? I didn't come up with this. It's what I saw other writers do. A street team is a group of people that are invested in the story and want to read like even earlier versions of it and give feedback. It's as simple as that. So I will send you from time to time what I have, and I'll ask you for feedback. I'll ask you to read it and to let me know, does it work for you? Is there stuff that works for me because I have the whole story in the back of my mind, but you're like, no, this needs to be better explained, or this part is boring, stuff like that. So if you join my street team, you will actually get access to the novel from its earliest inception. So that is kind of what I hope that some of you will want to do. And it's also a little bit of like behind the scenes. You will get to see a version of the story that may be very different once the book comes out. But the final story is also going to be based on your feedback. How do you join my street team? It's very simple. You go here. You go to this website. And there's a form that you can fill in. and it puts you on my mailing list, but also puts you in a special group that is marked Street Team, and I will only send to that Street Team these story updates, and I will ask for your advice and for your feedback. So hopefully those of you that are in the chat will want to do that. Another thing that you could help me with is to help me grow my new BookTube channel. I'm approaching 1,000 followers on my YouTube channel. So I've got youtube.com/FatherRoderick. That's the one where I do a lot of the Star Wars and movie stuff, but I also have at Father Roderick at Father Roderick -books. If you could subscribe to that channel, that would help me tremendously. And if you know other people that might want to subscribe, please send them a note and encourage them to join that channel. Why 1,000? It's because if my channel hits 1,000, I can start to switch on all the monetization options. Now, this obviously is not going to fund my novel. Every bit helps. But what it also does is it activates a different stage of the algorithm. And I've noticed with my main YouTube channel, once you get above 1,000, the algorithm is much more willing to send out your updates. So if you could please go to youtube.com/ and then @Father Roderick -books and hit that subscribe button. That would help me out tremendously. All right. Artindi says, maybe you've already said this, but how long do you expect your book to be? I've not said that. I have no idea. I have no idea. It's 40 chapters. That's what I know. But that's just basically because the structure that I want to follow is 40 chapters. How long is that going to be? At first I was like, I'm going to do the minimum so that it's just viable as a book and not as a novella. But I've noticed that I have a tendency to just... Once I start writing, the ideas don't stop. So I don't know. I'll let you know when it's done. Stephen, thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. I really appreciate it. Also, for those of you that are watching this after the live stream, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Again, subscribe to the channel. And we will do this again next month. I will do another live session. So that's another reason why you want to be subscribed to my Street Team, because then you will get notified. I want to just conclude with thanking you all for your interest and also for your encouragement and good advice. It's such a fun journey, and I'm so happy that I could share it with you. Hopefully this was fun for you as well. If you are a writer, by the way, there were a few authors in the chat. Send me a note. Let me know where I can follow you, because I love getting inspired by fellow authors as well, and I'm sure that I have a lot to learn from you. So please reach out to me. Have a wonderful rest of your day, wonderful weekend, and we will talk in the next one. Bye-bye.